Hello, everyone. Hello. So one day later and 1 hour later, we are here. We're back here for a special event, and I'm pretty excited about this one because we're trying to put together something new. So it's a new product, almost like launching a new game for us, and I'm super excited about what we're trying to do here because hopefully we'll do more in the future. So first things first, let us know what you like, what you don't like, if you like the structure, how we're doing it, and so on, because we're just very keen in putting this together, more of these together in the future. So, Field of Glory 2 Medieval, special event for the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa. How we'll be structuring this? We are going to have a first bit where we'll have a little bit of a talk with a senior lecturer of the University of Winchester, Rob Houghton. He's going to explain us a little bit more about the time and what happened and so on. So we'll have a little chat with him, about half hour, and then we'll dive into the battle with Richard York, the great Richard York, playing the game alongside historian Jose Marquez. He will be giving us the insights about the battle itself. So before we get to that, a little bit of news for anyone who's not really coming back to the channel a lot. So yesterday we achieved the 100 subscribers just after tea time. So if you have Sleets and you're in a Sleet store, you can get Field of Glory 2 Medieval from the Sleet store from yesterday onwards, and we're now 97 subscribers short of adding new DLCs to the Sleet store now. Also, if you hit coupon and exclamation mark and coupon, thanks gamer for showing how it's done, in the chat, you'll get a coupon to download the game Field of Glory 2 Medieval with a 20% discount from the Slytherin and Matrix Games store. Also, a reminder that we've just announced Swords and Scimitars. So the Holy Wars continue after Reconquista into the Crusades. The game is going to release towards the end of the summer. So make sure you follow the channel or wishlist the game on Steam, and you'll get to know more about when it's releasing and so on, or if you can follow Tea Time, of course. Right, so without further ado, I'll be connecting with Rob Houghton now, and we'll start our little chat. Hello, Mordante. Hey, Rob. Let's see. Hey, hello.
Hi Marco. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Hello, Rob. We've been trying to figure out what to talk about in the last couple of hours. So, Rob, you're a senior lecturer at the University of Winchester. You're expert in medieval Italian cities. Can you just give us a bit of an overview of what you do, why you like games, and why you're into games as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Sorry, I'll move the mic slightly away from me. So I'm a lecturer at the University of Winchester, and what do? I teach about medieval Europe and medieval Mediterranean. I do a lot of work in particular about Italy in the Central Middle Ages. But I'm also, to be honest, I'm a massive nerd. I'm really into games of all sorts, including computer games in particular. And yeah, I really like the way that games can present history in a very different way from any other form of media, from books, from TV, film, and so forth. And that's got me thinking about, well, can we use games as a way of teaching or as a way of representing historical research? And I think it's absolutely brilliant, the sorts of things you're putting out just now, particularly these pieces that are looking at areas which we don't really hear that much about. So things like the Reconquista, but also Northern Italy, Eastern Europe, and so forth.
Yeah, and one of the things you do with some other fellows, professors and lecturers and so on, you actually run a festival about Middle Ages and games, right?
Yes, no, absolutely. Sorry. I run over the last couple of years. I've run a conference titled "The Middle Ages in Modern Games," which is it's a Twitter conference. And this year we had 50 speakers just tweeting a series of papers. You can still find them over on Twitter. The handle's at Mid Ages Mod Games. And please do, yeah, if anyone's listening, if anyone's interested in how games interact with history and with the Middle Ages in particular, then please do take a look at that. Hopefully there'll be a few things in there that might be of interest.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting way of tackling a serious subject with some fun as well, some fun elements as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think games. Well, we know games can be fun, but we know that games can be serious as well. They can talk about important issues, and they can talk about history in a mature and sensible manner, I think. But
yeah, they do. So diving into the Reconquista, we wanted to know from you a bit more about the historical landscape before the Battle of Das Navas de Tolosa. So can you give us a quick overview of how the political situation was in Iberia at the time before the battle?
No, absolutely. So very often when we talk about Iberia, when we talk about the Reconquista, we hear this account of like a clash of civilizations. So all the Christian kingdoms in the north fighting against the Muslim states in the south of Iberia, and gently going back and forth over the course of the Middle Ages. And we see these various different groups getting involved on either side. So we see the Crusaders coming in from Europe. We see the Almohads, we see the Almoravids coming in from North Africa. But it's not quite as simple as that. It's a more complicated situation because we've got all these various different Christian kingdoms up in the north, places like Leon, Castile, Navarre, Portugal, of course. And we find just as often as they're fighting against Muslim states, these Christian kingdoms are fighting amongst themselves. So the Kingdom of Castile in particular always seems to be at war with one or other of the other kingdoms in the north. Likewise, down in the south, it's not just this homogenous Muslim superpower down there. There are all these various different states based around the main cities of the regions of Valencia, Caboda, Toledo, or to Lisbon up until 1147, and they're just as often they're fighting amongst themselves as they're fighting against the Christians. And at the same time, it's important to emphasize these states on either side of the divide, they're not purely Christian, they're not purely Muslim. So yes, certainly they'll have Muslim rulers or they'll have Christian rulers, but we'll have Muslims, we'll have Christians, we'll have Jews living within these different kingdoms. And I'm not saying that it's certainly not a utopia if you're not following the right religion in one of these kingdoms, but it's much more multicultural, it's much more diverse than a lot of these basic accounts of the period would have us believe. So essentially then, what we see in the Middle Ages in Iberia is this really complex political situation, these various different kingdoms fighting against each other, fighting against the Muslim states in the south, these various divisions within the kingdoms and within the Muslim states. And of course, at the same time, we've got all these external powers getting involved in the region, whether it's the Franks with Charlemagne and everything coming down into Iberia, whether it's the Almoravids or the Almohads coming up from North Africa. So yeah, a really, really complex situation, really interesting.
I think we've got a good map to show this.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Just saw that. Yeah. And what was the we just announced the Crusades game, and how is the Reconquista actually fitting within the whole Crusade topic?
Yeah, well, no, absolutely, and thanks for bringing up the map here. It's a really useful illustration of just how complicated things were in the north, certainly. With the Crusades, so yeah, the Crusades, they're connected to the Reconquista fairly integrally. So the Crusades, they start off towards the end of the 11th century with what they call Crusade from Urban II at the Council of Clermont, or perhaps the Council of Piacenza about a year earlier. And we see this new massive movement, this new religious ideology behind warfare that we've not really seen explicitly expressed previously. And we see these massive armies marching from Europe, mainly from France, but Germany, northern Italy, even England, marching down to the Holy Land. And that coincides with something of a fundamental change within Iberia, or at least the ideology within Iberia. Because the Crusades, they show up about 10 years or so, a decade or so after we start to see a new sort of war being pitched within Iberia. We see a number of knights travelling down to Iberia to fight alongside these kingdoms, Castile, of Aragon and so forth, to fight alongside these kingdoms against Muslim opponents. And in exchange for doing so, well, they're given remission of their sins. They're not quite given the plenary indulgences, which we see showing up with the Crusades, this complete wiping of the slate that we see getting attached to the First Crusade and then later on. But it's very similar. A lot of the rhetoric is very similar. And in many ways, the Crusades themselves, they come out of the Reconquista. They come out of this ideology that's emerging within Iberia. And at the same time, after the First Crusade, Iberia becomes a focal point of the Crusades. We see this as early as the Second Crusade. I mentioned very briefly, Lisbon was formerly the centre of a Muslim state. Lisbon falls to the forces of some of the forces of the Second Crusade in 1147. Basically, the English Crusaders on the Second Crusade, they just stop off at Lisbon. They join the rule of what's going to become Portugal, who's laying siege to Lisbon, and they help them take the city. And from that point onwards, we see this vision of going to war in Iberia being the equivalent of going to war in the Holy Land. So you get the remission of your sins. We see Crusades called explicitly to fight in Iberia, and indeed that's what the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa is all about. It's in response to a call to crusade in Iberia from the Pope Innocent III. So we see all these ideas, all this rhetoric that we see attached to the Crusades gets attached very quickly to warfare within Iberia. And we see a lot of the baggage that comes along with that. So we see the establishment of, a phenomenal number of knightly orders within Iberia. There's a huge range of these figures, and the Order of Santiago, perhaps the most famous of these groups of knights. At the same time, we see a Muslim response. We see the rebirth of jihad rhetoric down to a certain extent down in the south of Iberia, but perhaps more expressly down in Morocco, down in what's now Western Sahara. And we see this response to the crusade within Iberia, this response to the Reconquista, in much the same way as we see a response to the Crusades over in the Middle East.
It's really a mix of very different reasons. So there's political reasons. There's the holy, there's all the knights coming down, to fight alongside, their preferred faction, I guess. So ultimately, how holy were these holy wars? Were they very holy wars, or were they just a mix of the two things?
There's this great issue about whether we can really talk about any wars being holy, but that's something for another time. But no, certainly religious motivations are important for a number of the fighters within the Reconquista and within the Battle of Tolosa in particular. And we see, but it depends on who you are, it depends on where you're from, what your motivations for getting involved in the Reconquista are. So the residents of Iberia, the kings of the north, the emirs of the south, they'll use religion for their purposes. They'll use this handy ideology to support their position politically. And very often there will be very religious figures. They'll be devout, they'll be pious. They'll build vast cathedrals, vast mosques, all these religious complexes. They're very strong signs that they vehemently believe in their faiths. But at the same time, they're very practical about things. So we see these alliances made between Christians and Muslims. We see marriages occasionally between Christian kings and the daughters of Muslim emirs. And in fact, only about a decade before the Battle of Tolosa, we see the King of Aragon entering into an alliance with one of the emirs in North Africa against the King of Castile. It doesn't really go anywhere, but there's always this idea, well, yes, we're meant to be allying with our Christian counterparts just across the border, but very often they're the main threat to us. Very often it's the outsiders, so the Crusaders, the Almohads, the Almoravids, these forces coming in from outside of Iberia, who show up in the peninsula, and they tend to be, well, very often they tend to be the ones who are driving this religious aspect of the conflict, which makes sense. They've arrived there because, well, the kings, the emirs in Iberia have called them in. They're saying, we're being oppressed by Islam, by Christianity. Please come and save us. And they appeal to these ideals of holy war. So we shouldn't really be surprised that the Crusaders, the Almohads, are showing up with these religious ideas. So yeah, it can be hugely important depending on who you are.
All right.
And
so we have this very complex situation, and I guess that, we're talking about a very specific battle here. So what was going on in Iberia in the build up to the battle, just approaching the battle? What was the just general situation?
No, absolutely. So yeah, it's a really interesting situation. It quite neatly illustrates a lot of what we've talked about so far, really. So in the build up to this battle, we see the rise of the Almohads as a force to be reckoned with, based around Morocco, but extending their power, well, more or less all the way down to Ghana, down the Sahara, across to Tunisia, and extending their influence up into Iberia, where they've been summoned by various emirs to try and counter a new wave of expansionism, mainly by the Castilians, but also the Kingdom of Aragon, the Kingdom of Portugal, are quietly expanding. And as we get towards the end of the 12th century, in 1195, there's another massive battle, fairly close to Toledo, down in central Iberia. And this is the Battle of Alacos, or the disaster of Alacos, where the King of Castile, and Alfonso VIII, is defeated by the Almohad Caliph. And it's a substantial defeat. We see a fairly substantial number of the knightly orders decimated there, and they lose a number of their fortresses. Toledo falls back into the hands of the Almohads. There's a very real pressure on the Christian kingdoms in the north. And in response to this, well, the King of Castile, Alphonse, goes to Innocent III, this great pope over in Rome, who calls a crusade into Iberia to counter the Almohad threat, to protect the Christian kingdoms of the north. Is basically how he terms it. And Innocent's a really interesting figure. He's by many accounts he's the most important pope in the whole of the Middle Ages, perhaps in the whole of history. Up until relatively recently, he was one of only 2 popes who had his own action figure. I believe you can still find that online. I don't think the Vatican sells them, but anyway. And Innocent wants a crusade. He wants a successful crusade, and he's tried a couple of times before this point, and it's been a bit of a disaster in both cases. So first of all, and most famously, he calls the Fourth Crusade, which was meant to go down to Egypt to take care of the Sultan down in Egypt and to secure the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And as I'm sure many of your listeners are aware, it ends up sacking Constantinople twice and burning the city to the ground, more or less. So Constantinople, one of these big Christian centres. Innocent's second attempt at crusade, Albigensian crusade, down in the south of France, is meant to be going down to deal with a group of heretics, the Cathars, in the south of France. And as we're approaching this point in history, though, it's been a bit of a disaster. It's ended in the execution of good Christians. It's ended in basically a civil war in the south of France. So Innocent really wants a victory. So he calls for this crusade into Iberia. He tries to organise an alliance among the Christian kings, which is a bit of a problem because Castile's been fighting everybody else. And we see three kings participating in the battle. 3 kings respond to this call for crusade. The King of Castile, the King of Aragon and the King of Navarre. The King of Navarre, almost doesn't show up. He has to be pressured by the Crusaders to show up. They stop off at his court and say, "You've really got to come along. We're fighting this great religious war." He doesn't really want to. Castile has taken a huge chunk of his territory in recent years, but he gets pressured into doing so. Meanwhile, the kings of Leon and Portugal, they're nowhere to be seen. The King of Leon says, "Yeah, I'll come along. I'll join the crusade. But the King of Castile has to return these 5 castles to me, which he's taken in the last decade." So even at this point of crisis, there's still these divisions within the kingdom. And yeah, this crusade, it meets the forces of the Almohad Caliph. This is Muhammad al-Nasir, who's coming up to try and capitalize on the victory at Alakos a decade or so previously. So we have all these, and Muhammad is joined by various local forces, these Tafa Emirates, and yeah, very complex situation on both sides, really. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the battle plays out later on in the show.
All right, yeah, it's interesting because it's almost like nobody wanted to fight this ultimately. So one of the things we were, when we pick battles for a game, we have to sort of come up with the most important battles of that specific time frame. And Las Navas de Tolosa is of course one important battle. But how important was it? How important were the consequences of the battle? Was it a pivotal moment? Was it not?
Yeah, no, it was a really important battle, but maybe not for the reasons you might think. So very often it's portrayed a bit like the Battle of Hastings, 1066. So it's this great victory for one side. In this case, the Castilians. Sorry, spoiler alert here. It's a great victory for the Castilians and the Crusaders against the Almohads, against the Muslim forces from southern Iberia. And it was a great victory. It was a large battle, substantial casualties on the Muslim side, and we don't really see the Almohads being successful in Iberia again after this point. But at the same time, the Iberian kingdoms, these Christian kingdoms in the north, they're not really able to capitalize on this success. Because in fact, very shortly after the battle, the King of Castile and the King of Aragon, they make a pair of truces with the Almohad Caliph. They make peace with him, and they go back to fighting each other. And it's only about 2 decades later that we start to see the expansion of these kingdoms further south again. And it is important. It's a massive propaganda coup, especially for the King of Castile, to a certain extent for the King of Aragon. It's great for Pope Innocent and for the Crusade movement, because this is a movement that's somewhat on its last legs at this point, and it's had a number of disasters. Basically, the First Crusade worked, and nothing has worked since. In the longer term, it leads a bit to the fragmentation of Al-Andalus, this Muslim region of Spain, and perhaps it contributes to the start of Castilian domination. So it's a great part of the Castilian and then the Spanish claim to be the rightful rulers over a substantial part of the peninsula. It's really important to emphasize, though, that it's not the end of the Reconquista. So this is 1212. We don't see the complete destruction of Muslim polities within Iberia for almost another 3 centuries. So it is an important battle, but it's not the end.
Okay. Well, I guess that it actually was pretty useful for selling more action figures of Innocent III.
Absolutely.
Thanks for all this. It's really cool. I wouldn't stop asking you questions. It's really great. We've got to dive into the battle now, which is great. So if there's any question whilst we move to the battle for Rob Alton, just let us know from chat. And one of the things. Here's the map. Of the situation after the battle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see the areas around the battle. If you've got a particularly large monitor, you'll be able to see it takes a number of decades before Castile, before Aragon really start to capitalize on the defeat. So yeah, it's a very, very slow and steady changes brought about by the battle.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Rob. It's been really, really cool. We're going to, as I said, we want to do this more and more. So, guys, you let us know what you liked, what you didn't, what you think the format and so on, because we really want to do this format more and help for a little bit of more knowledge about what happened in our history, which is always cool and interesting to know about. Thanks a lot, Rob.
No, thank you very much for having me. And yeah, really looking forward to the battle.
Okay, cheers.
Okay.
Right, so guys, we have a battle to fight. Before we get to that, Bruno is going to sort of work some magic to actually set things up. I think I need to disconnect from this, right, Bruno? Okay, I'm going to do this. See, it's all live, unabridged. I'm going to see if there's any mosquito to kill in the meantime. But other than that, guys, I've seen that somebody already redeemed Philoglory 2. So you were waiting for Philoglory 2 Medieval to be added to the Street Store. Good boys. Also, a reminder that, as I said, what we're going to do after this is we're going to cut all the nice bits, or basically cut me out of it, and then cut the nice bits out of and make a YouTube video to sort of make a summary of the event, because yeah, I guess it's this is the goal, right? To sort of use a game to tell you more about what happened. I think this pre-battle thing is very interesting for a number of reasons, because it sort of helps set the tone to what you're going to see later. Richard promises he's never played the battle. I don't really know if it's true or not, but who knows. And I like the idea of us now watching Richard and the historian talking about the battle. Jose, I had him on the phone earlier. He said he tried the battle out and he failed miserably. So. With the Christians. So let's see what happens live with Richard. He promised me that he's not going to lose huge, but at least it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Sorry? Yeah, don't worry. We're here. We're chatting. If you've got any question, guys, just let us know. This battle is actually available in the game. I think there's 8 historical battles, Gavin, in the game, and it's one of these battles is Las Navas de Tolosa. We've got a few battles of the Guelph and Ghibellines still part of the Reconquista DLC, and some famous historical battles from the Reconquista. He will just lose every CNC and sub-generals. Well, Richard is, you never know what happens with Richard, because he says that he didn't want to play it before, so we'll see. So should I connect now? Yeah, but we have no time from Jose. Okay, but it's gonna come, I think. All right, so we're waiting for Jose to turn his camera on. And no problem, Jose. No problem at all. I think it is.
Okay,
yeah,
perfect.
we're all here. Great stuff. So you guys know the hype man, Richard York. He's been part of a memes collection also. Now, can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Yeah, and also. So the guy, he's there, he's going to play the game. And Jose, he is a military historian. You specialize, Jose, in war heroes and Spanish history. How's that? What's about that?
Sorry, Marco, you got very choppy.
All right, okay.
You.
I can easily let you go with the battle, I think.
It's not me.
Jose, can you hear me?
Very well. Is it just me, Jose?
Yes.
All right, so you're specialized in war heroes and Spanish history, right?
I can't hear him.
Well,
I
you
think-
know,
I
there
think-
are in all the battles we have heroes.
All
We
right.
have heroes. This is my specialty. So let's talk about one of the most epic battles in the Spanish medieval history. That is this one, Las Navas de Tolosa. Remember, 3 kings in a battlefield. Come on, this has never happened. So
Yeah.
it's incredible. So you know, I'm ready. I'm ready for
All right.
this
Okay.
wonderful
I love your
adventure.
excitement. I love your excitement. So I'll let you go with the battle. Richard and Jose, have fun, and we'll see you out there.
I can't. I'm
out
sorry,
in
Mike. I
Trestor's
can't hear
night.
my headset. I don't know what's wrong.
All right. Let's go then.